All right, we're going to get started now. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for connecting with us today from California and across Canada and the US. We appreciate that you are making time for us and this webinar today. My name is Stephen Armstrong. I'm the president and co-founder of Maple Business Council. And together with the Consulate General of Canada in Los Angeles and the Canadian Consulate in San Diego, we're very pleased to welcome you. I would first like to take care of some webinar administration details. We have phones on mute today for the benefit of audio quality for all our participants. And if you would like to send a question to our speakers, you can do so using our chat box. We'll be taking questions at the end of all presentations today, and we have quite a large group with us. So if we don't get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up with you after the event. We are also recording today's event for the benefit of those who aren't able to join us live. Now, with those details taken care of, we'll be hearing from three leading technology companies today: BlackBerry-Cylance, QA Consultants, and xahive. Now, each of these companies are Canadian-based, are leaders in their respective fields, and have a growing presence here in Southern California. We're also honored to welcome a very special guest speaker with us from the Department of Homeland Security, Mr. Todd Siegal, who is the resident agent in charge in Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the Office of Professional Responsibility in San Diego. Now, Todd will be discussing some of the risks associated with teleworking today, certainly a topic that affects both worker and employer. And with our focus on technology innovation with Canadian roots, it's now my pleasure to welcome Ms. Karen Sleeman, Counsel and Trade Commissioner at the Consulate of Canada in San Diego, to say a few words. Karen, the floor is yours.
There we go. Thanks very much, Stephen. Happy to be here. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for connecting with us today. Basically, sorry, I just opened up my wrong notes, bear with me. There we go. So as Consul, I'm going to be very brief as I'll be passing it on to my colleagues shortly. As Consul and Trade Commissioner here in San Diego, we are a small satellite office to our Consulate General of Canada in Los Angeles. Both missions have a total of 16 trade commissioners, trade team members covering an array of sectors. So I'm here with my colleague Isabella Silk, who will be presenting today. But first I wanted to just give you a very quick snapshot of who we are and what we do. So we, the Consulate General of Canada in Los Angeles and the Consulate in San Diego, we cover Southwest USA in addition to Nevada and Arizona. And what we do is we provide a free service for Canadian clients who contribute to Canada's economic growth, who have demonstrated capacity to go internationally and have a good potential to add value to the Canadian economy. So we have over 1,000 trade commissioners in more than 160 cities worldwide, and we also have a number of offices across Canada who are usually the first point of contact for companies before they're looking at expanding. So you will see sort of on the screen here a quick rundown of what we do and type of services that we offer. And basically we are here to help them succeed. So with us out in the field, we need to keep our finger on the pulse. We're constantly communicating with local contacts. We're looking at ways to foster partnerships, joint ventures, R&D collaboration, direct business to business ventures, and so forth. So you will see us in many of the very large trade events, and we're there to connect the two together. So we're also here to attract foreign direct investment to Canada. So there's a lot more that I can speak about, but I want to be able to give more time to Isabella and our other partners that are presenting today. So I will now introduce Isabella, who will talk about Canada's cybersecurity landscape. and so forth. So over to you, Isabella.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Karen. As Karen mentioned, my name is Isabella Schilp. I'm the Trade Commissioner covering the tech sector here at the Consulate General of Canada in Los Angeles.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm excited to be here today to support 3 great examples of Canadian cybersecurity companies who have found a lot of really great success here in Southern California. These companies are examples of Canada's strong cybersecurity sector and Canada's commitment to adopting the most modern digital technologies in a rapidly evolving cybersecurity landscape. Canada has a really dynamic cybersecurity sector. It includes strengths like cryptography and encryption, mobile authentication, biometrics, surveillance, and tracking and sensor development as well. And Canada's cybersecurity strength is a result of 3 main things: a strong regulatory environment, which includes a focus on privacy legislation and supporting the cybersecurity sector that way. The support of innovative knowledge-based economy. Canadians' universities consistently rank among the top 100 institutions globally. And this world-class education system, combined with a high quality of life and a diverse multicultural population, creates a really interesting and talented and well-trained pool of employees as well as entrepreneurs. And finally, Canada's geopolitical stability provides a safe and economically attractive business climate. So Canada is home to actually the safest and most stable banking system in the world. And this stability helps to encourage the development of innovative solutions by Canadian companies. So as you'll see from the presentations today, Canada is at the forefront of cybersecurity technology. If you're interested in connecting with Canada's leading cybersecurity companies like those today, or if you're interested in learning about Canada's climate across the business sectors, please feel free to reach out to me or any of the other trade commissioners, as well as our partners like the Maple Business Council. I'm going to actually hand it over now to Stephen, who's the co-founder and president of Maple. Stephen, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Isabella and Karen. We really appreciate all the great work that you and your colleagues do in the Trade Commissioner Service. And thank you as well for your support of today's webinar. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Maple Business Council, we're a cross-sector, membership-based networking group focused on growing the economic ties between Canada and Southern California. Robert Kelly and I, together with fellow Canadian executives, founded Maple in 2015 to promote bilateral investment, trade, and entrepreneurship. And we do this through a number of programming channels. We have regular networking events in Canada and Southern California, commercial delegations to major Canadian markets, and we provide thought leadership platforms for our members to share their expertise and tell their stories. We're also honored to be a partner of the Canadian Consulate and to be working with 2 of our member firms on this webinar today. So now onto our agenda. We'll be starting with Todd Siegal from the Department of Homeland Security, after which Sem Panambalam, president of cybersecurity firm xahive, Farron Lyons, enterprise account manager of BlackBerry-Cylance, and Bill Klages, VP influencer and partnership relations for Toronto-based software quality firm QA Consultants, will be speaking. So now I'd like to introduce Todd Siegal and briefly share a little bit more about Todd's background. Todd previously served as a long-term supervisory special agent with Homeland Security Investigations. HSI is the investigative arm for DHS and is the 2nd largest criminal investigative agency within the US federal government. Todd led the HSI Los Angeles Cyber Crimes Group, investigating fraud, the illicit digital economy, business email compromise, dark net marketplaces, network intrusion, and other cyber-related criminal activity. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Todd Siegal to the floor. Todd, please go ahead.
Thanks, Stephen. First, I apologize. I don't have slides for you to view today. The government is a little quirky about releasing PowerPoints on webinars, so I'm going to force you all to pay very close attention. So at HSI, we are tasked with investigating cyber crimes, along with several other federal agencies such as the FBI and the Secret Service. Specifically, we investigate the transnational criminal organizations, the TCOs, which commonly use cyber technology to facilitate criminal activity. So one of the ways HSI investigates these organizations is through our collaborative relationships with numerous federal, state, and local, and international partnerships. So how appropriate it is today that we have so many Canadian companies represented, because our closest international stakeholders are our Canadian law enforcement partners like CBSA and the RCMP, as well as many, state and local law enforcement Canadian partners. So not just domestically, of course, but also internationally. In Canada, HSI has a footprint in numerous Canadian cities, from Montreal all the way across Canada to Vancouver. So today, on behalf of HSI, I'm here to talk about the cyber vulnerabilities that the proliferation of teleworking over the last few weeks has presented to business and organizations. And the practice of working for an extended period of time outside the formal office has enabled by a whole host of digital tools, from email to mobile collaboration applications and remote desktops, really has become the new norm, as you know, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's become really readily apparent that most organizations haven't really quite fully committed to investing in the comprehensive strategies to protect their data. Of course, I'm preaching to the choir here, but given this mandatory telework transition over the last few weeks, and what will undoubtedly be a new norm when we return to, quote, the new normal in the future, we really have to take steps to educate our employees as to the potential security dangers that really now exist. There's a quote I like from the International Association of IT Asset Managers, an organization that many of you may be familiar with or even belong to. They said a spike in data breaches is greater than anticipated. So here's the quote that I like, which is really quite alarming. Companies and agencies may be hoping and praying that they are safe, but the work from home environment has created a multitude of opportunities for leaks. Too many organizations have left themselves wide open for attack. So as a result, I wanted to present today some examples that this organization and myself have been seeing, how this broad telework expansion in the last few weeks has allowed our assets and data to become vulnerable. So number one, an example is how our assets have been purposely left unsecured. So number one is by removing administrative permissions so our employees can complete tasks without oversight, or allowing unpatched or out of work, out of date, I should say, computers. This has allowed hackers to load malware. In some cases, companies that have already had high-end VPNs preloaded on their business computers have allowed employees to telework on personal devices, either with no VPNs or lower-end VPNs that may be less hacker resistant. So that's the first example. The second one is rapid addition of new hardware because of telework leaves little time for security. So this rapid teleworking has meant organizations have struggled to fill the IT asset gaps. And that's led to the purchasing of technology with little time to prepare or train workers on proper security, which has led to network intrusions. And we'll talk about network intrusions in a second. Thus, each asset has become an entry point for breaches. The third example is assets on home networks are obviously fundamentally less secure than in an office setting. So many businesses and organizations have had to react quickly to the stay-at-home orders. And if they were unprepared, which most were obviously, the IT departments had no chance to adapt, leaving many people working from home under less than ideal security conditions. In addition, company devices were deployed so quickly into the field, it left little time to ensure they would be secured with the proper VPNs. This also led to the use of shadow IT, which, as you know, are the unofficial apps that aren't approved by businesses or organizations. For example, personal data storage on home computers such as Dropboxes, and the personal use of laptops for official purposes, which of course has become the new norm in many cases if we haven't been able to allow them, official laptops because of resource limitations. Of course, an example of tech that is less secure than any of us would like are the various teleconference platforms which we're using here today. With social isolation, orgs have been forced to make a number of swift changes, and email and VPNs just really aren't enough. So employees need to hold, obviously, meetings. Enter, for example, Zoom, which we're using today. 200 million people have found Zoom as their go-to virtual teleconferencing platform. However, some issues with Zoom and other teleconferencing platforms do exist. And I'm not just talking about unfavorable camera angles or if your colleague wanders off with their laptop into the restroom. So many companies and government agencies obviously limit their use, but obviously that's not really an option for most of us. So due to webcam spying, trolls, leaked emails and photos, obviously these limitations are beginning to proliferate, and they just obviously don't just apply to Zoom. So some examples we've seen obviously is the Zoom bombing, or and obviously Zoom has made some necessary setting and encryption changes, such as waiting rooms, which we had here today. But I also like to remind you of some quick common sense steps before using Zoom. And obviously we'd like to make sure they're disseminated to our employees. For example, do not share meeting IDs or passwords. Create one-time meeting IDs and make sure you start new accounts for personal use. Manage your screen sharing options. Change screen sharing to host only, and obviously ensure that you're using the updated version of your remote access and meeting applications. And obviously these steps are found online and you can disseminate these to your employees. And these steps will prevent hackers and others from exploiting your virtual workplaces. And the last example of telework vulnerabilities I'd like to highlight is that unprepared users are obviously making costly mistakes. I like to refer to this as the chaos theory, meaning doing things differently because of the telework is an opening for a potential attack. Essentially, the preceding steps I've outlined can build and become very dangerous when users aren't trained or prepared or are prepared for online threats. And so as a result, it makes our organizations vulnerable to criminal schemes. So I wanted to end by talking about what those cybercrime schemes are. So obviously you're all familiar with the first one, which is of course the business email compromise scheme, the BEC, which is a type of phishing scheme where cyber attackers impersonate a company executive like a CIO or CFO to get an employee or customer to transfer money or sensitive data. It accesses a company email account or spoofs an owner's identity, and then emails are then sent to an employee or customer in an effort to steal funds. The second scheme is, of course, a phishing scheme, very common. It's all over the news lately. It's an email message that appears to be someone with whom you do business or have a personal relationship with. Again, appears to be from someone. It's designed to trick you into providing a username, a credential, or a password, with obviously the resulting transfer of funds, which is very hard to confirm. A recent Google study, which I think was just out a week or so ago, saw a 350% increase, 350% increase since January. Obviously, that's due entirely to the teleworking increase and other related recent developments. And the third scheme, of course, is ransomware. So that's obviously malware that prevents you from accessing your computer until a fee is paid. And that's a digital encrypted payment that's done anonymously, either in Bitcoin or lately we've seen Monero, because it's harder for investigators to track. So the scale of these schemes by these transnational organizations are increasing exponentially due to the number of people teleworking. So these phishing and BEC scams are not new, of course. We've heard about them the last several years. They're just adapting to the times. So what we've seen as investigators is these bad actors are exploiting the fear and confusion around the COVID-19 pandemic. So I want to talk a little bit about that now with some specific examples. So we're seeing phishing and these other schemes designed as appeals for help around COVID, disinformation campaigns, or new information about COVID. And they're all designed around COVID-19 to gain login credentials, install malicious software, or steal data or funds. And again, they're old schemes, but they're all designed around the COVID-19 or coronavirus. And so some specific scams I want to mention are, the first one is a BEC specific scam. So these are, again, specifically, they're spoof CEO, CIO, wire funds email requests to a supplier or vendor. So what we're seeing is a new one, which is a BEC gift card scam, which appears to be originating from the boss requesting money. It may be something like this. For example, hey, this is Charlie. I've got COVID-19 and I'm in isolation. So I need a gift card to pay my expenses and you need to send it to so-and-so ASAP. So obviously it plays on the fears of COVID-19. He says he's in isolation. He's hard to get a hold of. And it's been very effective in the last few weeks. So it's important more than ever that we have policies in place as CISOs and employers that no matter who calls, even if it's the CEO, because they're no longer down the hall, that we have to have those policies in place to avoid these kinds of scams. You've recently seen on TV from Shark Tank, Barbara Corcoran, who talked about her BEC scam, and she fell prey to this exact scam, and she's obviously very sophisticated. It was a $400,000 BEC scam. It was a very sophisticated. So the next scam I want to talk about, the phishing COVID-19 related scam, again, targeted phishing scams. And again, they're home to work offers. So, hey, we notice you're out of work due to COVID-19, or they're Medicare stimulus related or charity around the WHO or FCC, again, all related to COVID-19. So for example, 3 that we've seen recently, they're COVID related emails purportedly to be from the WHO. Again, they're phishing. So they have links that when you click on them, oh, okay, they're from the WHO. I better, they're asking, there were links about current WHO information. So I'm going to click on these links. But of course, they redirect you to nefarious, nefarious links. So that's the first one we've seen a lot of. The second one is what's called a COVID lock scam, which is a screen lock attack, purportedly from, it's ingenious, it's purportedly a coronavirus tracker where the scammers claim real-time outbreak tracking. And of course, when you click on it, it grants permission to access your settings. And of course, they then steal everything. And the third one, we talked about Zoom earlier, and some of those issues, but just this week it was reported Skype had seen a telework wave of phishing emails, which had stolen credentials by spoofing Skype cell numbers and emails. And WebEx had a similar phishing scheme designed to steal credentials. And so all these phishing scams have used network engineering. These organizations research and they send targeted emails to their subjects. So all these scams and attacks are exacerbated due to teleworking limitations as outlined above, which in part limits our ability to communicate with our colleagues, allowing scammers to exploit the vulnerability. So I want to end by a few tips, which we put in the hands of our employees, which can secure our data, which is obviously number one, let's make sure our employees are using VPNs and they turn them on. We want to make sure that we educate our employees on handling sensitive data and what their responsibilities are during teleworking. We want to make sure that when discussing critical information at home, we want to make sure our employees know to ensure their virtual assistants like Google Assistant, Alexa are turned off or not picking up our conversation. We also want to make sure that we encrypt any sensitive data to protect against loss or hacking. We want to make sure that any peripheral devices, such as wireless headsets or monitors that we connect to our computer, are also protected. We want to make sure that our home Wi-Fi connections are secure and that we're not defaulting to the factory passwords. When these at-home restrictions are lifted, obviously we're going to continue to have some enhanced teleworking in the future. So we want to make sure that when our employees are continuing to telework, they do not telework in public settings because of obviously the security concerns. Also, we want to make sure employees are concerned about shoulder surfing and eavesdropping. And obviously the 3 most important things, change our passwords frequently. Our employees still aren't doing that. We want to make sure that they are not just employing the VPNs and the BlackBerry digital workplace devices, but also that we strongly consider 2-factor authentication to boost security. And I have some flyers about this that I also want to, some flyers and some security issues. So again, as a result, I know network security seems insignificant in the face of a pandemic, but it's up to us and our workforce to work together. And training and education really is the only way to ensure our organizations get through this without becoming, the latest security statistic. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Todd, for the very timely and important considerations. Certainly the risk of being a victim of a scheme or scam, especially during the pandemic, is sobering. And you've opened our eyes to the impact that we can have by taking some very pragmatic and prudent measures. So it's now my pleasure to welcome our next two speakers, Sem Panambalam, President of cybersecurity firm xahive, and Farron Lyons, an Enterprise Account Manager at BlackBerry-Cylance. Sem, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you to Maple and the Canadian Consulate for this opportunity. And Todd, that was an excellent presentation. In today's presentation, on the next slide, we'll go through the objectives. So both Farron and I will look at the global and US cybersecurity data in 2019. We'll then follow it up with IoT and endpoint security and the importance of critical communication, and end with cybersecurity best practices tips. And on the next slide, we'll just take a look at global cybersecurity data that was reported in 2019. So the cost of data breach has certainly increased globally from last year to 2019, which is at 3.92 million. And in terms of the cost per record as well, you see a slight increase of $150 per record. And the cost per incident over the previous year has slightly increased again by 1.5%. But the most important one that we should look at is the cost savings from the incident response team, because that's now increased to $39 per record. And the likelihood of reoccurring breaches over 2 years is said to be at 29.6%, which is a slight increase. But as Todd had mentioned, due to COVID, there are a lot more activity in terms of cybersecurity breaches and incidences, and that certainly has not been recorded. So we'll probably be looking at those numbers next year. Now on the next slide, the U.S. Cybersecurity environment must be noted that the U.S. organizations actually pay the highest price for losing customers after a breach. On average, it's about $4.2 million, and this includes everything from abnormal turnovers of customers, the increased cost for acquisition activities, reputation losses, and of course, diminished goodwill. And this is mainly because US organizations have a higher cost per customers because they have more choice and there's competition. And with current notification laws, such as the California Consumer Privacy Act, for instance, customers in California and around the US are actually a lot more aware of their cybersecurity regulations and their privacy regulations, and they have a higher expectation of the organizations that they're working with. On the next slide, I'll turn it over to Farron. He'll take it from here.
Thank you, Sem. Hey, everybody. So on this one, we just wanted to kind of talk about maybe an evolutionary, what we see in the marketplace today for where organizations are in terms of enabling users with mobility, folks working outside of the office, and where we kind of see as an entry into this conversation is just endpoint management. It's been around for a while, more than a decade. So the ability to take a phone or a laptop, and if it's lost or stolen, to wipe that device. So that's kind of where we're just getting out there as an entry level into real hyperconnectivity. And at that next level, where we start to think about the separation of personal information and corporate information. So where we start to expose corporate applications on a device, and maybe some policies around when that corporate information can leave a corporate system and maybe into a personal system. So we think about mail and calendaring and maybe some third-party applications that a corporation uses. And then we get into secure collaboration. So here's where we're really getting into a couple of things. Protecting content itself. So recognizing that content is going to leave our own business systems when that goes out to constituents, to clients, to business partners, business associates, and things like that. And we still need to maintain control over that content when it leaves our system. So we're thinking about really critical kind of information that you know, we typically haven't had tight controls on in the past, but with rights management and digital loss prevention, we do have some technologies to get at that. But really, we're just talking about exposing that and then policies around when it can leak outside of corporate containers and corporate systems, things like that. When we get into process optimization, thinking about workflows and mapping out processes for organizations so that we can speed those things up with some external information. So we start to see some machine-to-machine communication. Think about maybe a trigger date for a new step in a workflow. So this really is starting to coordinate systems inside of an organization that is going to take a document or content through its content lifecycle and make sure that that is secure and protected all the way through it. And then finally, as we get to the far right-hand side of the screen here, when we really get out to AI and machine learning as a way to make decisions within guidelines of policy inside of an organization. So we have a lot of machine-to-machine communication and decision-making that's going to take place within workflows or maybe without the input of humans. And on this slide, we'd really like to think about security as a whole, right? And with mobile devices being the majority of vectors of attack for organizations, that things like antivirus and detection and response really goes across the board here. Mobile phones included, Internet of Things included in that conversation as well. In the next slide, one thing that we might want to consider as we come into, or crises. We happen to be in the middle of one of these. But there are others that organizations face. Thinking here in Southern California, we have earthquakes, we have fires, we have large organizations where travel bans have affected organizations. And so crisis communication is all about, number one, making sure that our employees are safe, that they're considered in terms of their health, and then business continuity. How do we make sure that our organization can get back to business as quickly as possible when faced with a crisis? So that's exactly it. When, let's say, a shaker happens, are our people okay? Where are they? Do we need to coordinate with third parties like fire, police, ambulance, and make sure that they know where our people are who need assistance? If this is maybe a fire at a manufacturing plant, we're tied into the fire panel. We can contact the fire engines on their en route. We can tell them where the fire is. We can give them access codes. We can coordinate assistance for those employees who need it medically, and we can coordinate those employees who are in good health to help get back to an operational status. And the next slide. What we're going to see here is really the different parts of an IT typical organization and the different things that make that up. But really, there are several things that we can be doing before an incident takes place to just as good practice within the organization. So Todd hit this one a lot, business email compromise. It's the number one way by far that folks are getting into organizations. So awareness, technologies to watch and examine emails for business email compromise. that goes hand in hand with training of our executives, our board, our employees on what to look for in those BEC attacks. And that's a consistent kind of thing that goes on. One thing that we just did was mandate that we put our emails in our signature, our email address in our signature. And you think that might be duplicative, but if somebody is using a false address and masking that, it's a quick way to check and make sure that we're hitting proper domains. So small things that you can do like that. Todd also hit on multi-factor authentication as a policy. So make sure that we do have multi-factor turned on, and that and that it's hitting all of our different systems that folks are using. Encrypted and secure communication services, no matter what kind of communications that might be, and looking specifically for those kind of workaround tools that organizations have. The avoidance of systems is definitely something that we want to look at. And a good guideline for encrypted secure communication services would be the NIST standards, to use that as a guideline. You might consider third-party auditors to come in and assess your organization's cybersecurity, maybe biannual basis, maybe an annual basis on those, but definitely looking at another set of eyes to come in and give you some reviews. And that flows down your stack as well in terms of your business partners, your vendors. Go through and audit their procedures, policies, and cybersecurity to make sure that they're not putting your organization at risk. And update those lists of vendors on a quarterly basis. You might consider cybersecurity insurance as a way to hedge your risk. And then test and drill on your cybersecurity initiatives on a quarterly basis, just to keep everybody kind of on their toes and aware of what things they need to do when that emergency happens, and give somebody kind of a reminder, because that's the first thing we do is kind of lose our heads when things start to happen. And I'm going to turn this back over to Sem now, and she's going to run through some of those things that once a breach occurs, what we can be doing.
Okay, thanks, Farron. So in terms of steps to take during a cybersecurity incident, as both Todd and Farron had mentioned, I mean, with COVID, there's been such an increase actually. Since March till now, there's been an increase of 667% of phishing emails, so which is what's really important in terms of business email compromise. So you need to ensure that if you do find yourself in the middle of this, that you need to record the issues and open an incident report, convene with your task team, and take whatever appropriate measures that you may already have laid out. Obviously, connect with your stakeholders. This includes not only your immediate customers, but also your value chain to restore your operations, and begin to update your management teams, your boards, your executives on what is happening with all the stakeholders as well. Now, and it's important to triage and report back to your boards and your executives, and you should really start taking the steps and looking at your disaster recovery protocol. Start implementing those, because that's something you probably already have in place, and follow that strict chain of evidence, because that's going to help your legal team and your compliance teams. And you should make sure that you communicate with all affected third parties, not just your clients, your regulators such as Todd and his group, and media within 72 hours. And on the next screen, we'll actually go through some steps to take after your cybersecurity incident. So this is essentially lessons learned. Take a look to see if you need to update any of your incident response reports. Review how your staff actually performed during this time, not just your staff, your vendors, your board members, your executive. Review and take a look if there's an emergency policy compliance that needs to get updated, or new things need to be implemented. and debug those issues that you have with your policies, and definitely reconcile reporting requirements with the regulators, because things may have changed from the time that you were working through that incident and what's happened afterwards, and make sure that your customers are aware of that too. And as Farron had mentioned before, definitely quantify that financial loss caused by that breach, especially if you already have cybersecurity insurance in place, because this is the time to gather all that info and report that. On to the next slide is essentially just to thank you guys for this opportunity. Both Farron and I enjoyed giving you some updates. I'll turn it over to Stephen.
Great, thank you very much, Sam and Farron. That was a really great discussion on what to consider before, during, and after a cybersecurity incident. So a lot of great things to think about there. So I would now like to introduce our final speaker today. Bill Klages is the VP Influencer and Partnership Relations at QA Consultants. Bill, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Stephen. And once again, just share my gratitude for having the Consulate and Maple sponsor this today, and grateful for my colleague presenters, Sam and Farron, and special guest Todd. We had some fantastic guidance so far. Hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy and safe. Hopefully we'll be out of this soon. So in this segment, I'm going to build on some of the prior messaging, but I'm going to focus a little bit more on the software side of security. I realize we have a diverse group attending here today. We've got some technology professionals, folks from the business side, but I hope this will be informative, if not a reinforcement. The objective is to really elevate your awareness of software exposure and risk that it places on your businesses. I'm going to review the top quality or top software quality trends, the security threat headwinds, and underscore the business risk from software intrusions that it's never been greater. And then finally, I'll touch down with some action steps you can consider to reduce your exposure and mitigate your risk. Throughout, I'd like to stress these key ideas. First, quality and security should be a habit. Secondly, all companies today can be considered software companies. And finally, security should be everyone's responsibility. So you see the quote on the screen from the philosopher Aristotle: quality is not an act, it's a habit. My instincts, though, urged me to wonder if quality was even a concept 2,400 years ago. So I did a little research online to understand what the context was. And as it turns out, there's no evidence that Aristotle actually wrote this. So, you know, you really can't trust everything you read on the internet. So let's jump in. Next slide. So experts are estimating that software vulnerabilities are responsible for at least a third of all cyber breaches, and some estimate it could be as high as 60%. Many of these breaches occur because bug or security fix patches are not applied timely or even at all. And I'm surprised to learn that 90% of the data breaches in the US occur right here in California and in New York, so just 2 states. In our state, California, the reports are trending up. So far this year, the average number of reported breaches is about 20 per month. But let me underline that the entries to this database that you see, I've put a screenshot there on the slide. Each entry can oftentimes represent multiple breaches to the same company over a period of time. Anyone can access this breach registry at california.gov, and you can see the link below there. And note that it's not just the big commercial companies that we hear about in the press, but it's really all of our organizations, orgs, small businesses, and EDUs. So what does it mean when we say that every company should be considered a software company? It doesn't necessarily mean that your company builds or markets software. What it's suggesting is that in order to do business and serve your customer or client base, you pretty much have to have a website or a mobile app that runs on various browsers or operating systems, and certainly many different types of devices. You should assume that these applications are being probed round the clock by bots scanning for vulnerabilities, and you should treat your apps as if they're your precious assets. It's essential to carry cyber insurance, as Farron and Todd recommended, but that won't ensure your reputation. Apply quality and security to your applications as if your business will fail without it. So let's continue on. So what should be top of mind in 2020 as it pertains to software security? We scanned the top trend forecasts from various software experts, testing tool providers, and research analysts, and we distilled them into these 5 top software quality trends. AI and automation and testing are being heavily promoted. However, a caution that although test automation is essential for building complex software and paving the path to faster software release, it's still maturing, and it's not yet the silver bullet to test for security vulnerabilities. AI testing is still in its infancy. IoT testing becomes very important, as IoT is a security nightmare, and much of the IoT traffic is unencrypted. With billions of endpoint devices being introduced as others are phased out, much of the software running these devices doesn't get patched for vulnerabilities. And let me see a raise of virtual hands if you guys are regularly checking and updating the firmware on your Alexa devices and smart home devices. I know I don't, but we should. Of course, cybersecurity and risk compliance is what we're focused here today, and that really speaks to elevating your software security testing and quality process. The threat headwinds are stronger and more ambitious than ever. First, the bad guys are more imaginative with finding creative ways to monetize a breach, especially on the dark web. Baby boomers will recall those cowboy western TV shows where the Wells Fargo stagecoaches are carrying the gold and the bandits would hide in places where the stagecoach would slow down. And in a sense, that's what's going on with today's virtual bandits. They're using automated bots to constantly scan your software and entry points. Of course, we've moved to the era of virtual computing and data is moving over the web. Insecure enterprise software applications are not necessarily any more secure just because you're moving them to the cloud. Software defects moved to the cloud are still software defects. Don't rely on infrastructure alone to keep your apps secure. Consider a process to identify and fix defects and vulnerabilities earlier in your software lifecycle. And of course, as we mentioned and we're all experiencing, the most recent headwind is the vulnerability due to accessing our software from our home computers and devices while remote working within these remote working conditions. So next, let's address business risk. As my co-presenters mentioned, the shift to a remote working atmosphere has magnified potential risk in our systems. And it's really to an extent that we never anticipated. As I suggested earlier, you are a software company and the likelihood of a breach is unfortunately very high. It's not a matter of if, but when it's going to happen to your organization. You should think about each of your applications as guarded assets and that your efforts can mitigate the risk of intrusion to those assets. In this picture, I show risk halos, and these illustrate how risk is relative to the intensity of your software security program. And in a sense, it's an ROI model. Security debt is the most troubling part of technical debt, or bad software. So many engineering shops and IT development teams are primarily focused or invest in design and functionality. Engineers lack training in security. We really don't teach building secure code in our schools. And of course, racing the clock to release software can translate to competitive advantages and increased revenues. Effectively mitigating risk can be done through threat modeling early in your process. Introduce application security testing throughout the process, or what we refer to as the shift left approach to finding defects and fixing them as early as possible. Promote a culture where all stakeholders in the development program are responsible for security. As I said earlier, let's make security a habit. Now into the home stretch with some key takeaways. Security is not a feature. It's not static or done only after deploying code. It must be integrated into your end-to-end lifecycle. Security is not automatic. It needs to be acknowledged and designed into your process. Scale your application security to cover all your applications and not just your critical ones. Scanning tools alone will not identify and certainly will not resolve security defects. Make sure you're augmenting with smart manual and exploratory testing. Have an eye for building or integrating your applications with a zero trust mindset. Presume that the infrastructure or network security will not relieve your software from intrusion. Prepare threat modeling prior to commencing software builds. Adopt DevSecOps or AppSec to formalize the security track in your development. Invest in security training programs and refresh them regularly. And promote security champions in your development and QA teams. Reinforce that training and security culture with gaming programs like internal white hacking, and pay cash bonuses or bug bounties and make it fun. Leverage global resources like the Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, for tools and resources, including some of the best practices and community forums. And lastly, the security landscape is changing so rapidly that it can overcome your internal capabilities. Don't hesitate to leverage third-party experts to assess your security program or help you build an application security roadmap. And that's it. I hope this has been informative for you. And once again, make security a habit. Thank you for joining. It was a thrill to put this on for you. And now I'll turn it back over for Q&A.
Great, thank you, Bill and everyone. This has been eye-opening, very informative, and after listening to all these presentations, the one word that keeps coming up for me is awareness. Awareness of everything around you, everything you receive, everything you send, and so that's a word to think of. So we are just a couple minutes away from that, and I want to thank those that have submitted a couple of questions, and hopefully that you will stay long enough to hear them. So the first question that has come up, and I'm just going to attempt something. I'm hoping, bear with me here. Well, I'll start with a question, even though we're on this away from the page. What are some cybersecurity governance procedures and protocols that we can quickly employ while my organization works from home and once we return to work? Maybe over to you, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So even though we're, working from home at this point, I think we can certainly put in place, policies, if you don't already have in place, related to cybersecurity education, because that's really important, because the majority of your teams may not be aware of what to do while working from home. And the steps that were outlined by Todd and Farron definitely would help with that. And also, check to see if you have vendor management policies in place, because oftentimes the weakest link may not be within your organization, but it could actually be the third party And as Todd had mentioned before, BlackBerry offers some really great tools to work directly from home, and that's secure through their digital workplace. So those are some tools to look at. As well as bring your own device. Like that's a policy that obviously, if most organizations don't have that policy in place, that's something that's happening now with majority of the workers using their own laptops, you know, to connect back to either the organization or through the VPN. So those are some things to definitely look at.
That's great, thank you. Farron, maybe I'll pass this question over to you. What steps can I take to ensure IoT and endpoint security is in place for my organization now?
Yeah, so really kind of look at that maturity model that we had up on the screen and get an idea for where you land on that today. Really, one thing that we see is that no two organizations are the same. Everybody is unique. And so we can come at it from the perspective of all operating systems are supported, all your ownership models are supported, whether that be corporate issued devices or whether that be bring your own devices. Form factors is another one that varies here. Are we just talking about telephones? Are we talking about tablets, laptops? Are we talking about things and devices? Are we talking about employees only? Are we talking about broadening that out and including some of our business partners and business associates and things like that? And take that right down to the level of content itself. Is there actual content that we need to protect outside of the systems that are used for collaboration within the organization? So it really is broad, and maybe just to value where your most important content is flowing as a place to start with that one. But I'd call us up. We can have a conversation about what it is in particular that's holding you back.
Great, thank you. We're just over by a minute, so I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 more questions. And for everybody else that had sent in, we'll come back to you directly after the webinar. I will pass this on to Bill. I think I'll throw this in for each one of you. Bill, how do you measure return on investment on application security investments?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, calculating the ROI benefit from security investments is going to be a little bit of a different mindset than what your typical project, you know, where you're measuring, you know, revenue gains or increases or SG&A cost reductions. And when you're assessing, you know, the ROI and in your investments, you should be working hand in hand with your risk and compliance folks to make sure that you understand the ramifications of any cybersecurity insurance and costs associated with that. But for security investments, it's really about cost avoidance, and it's in a sense it's an insurance policy, and it's a cost of doing business. But one way to think about it is, and this is really beyond whatever your cyber policy may cover. Think about it in terms of what, you know, Sem had mentioned earlier in terms of the average cost of a cyber breach, right? So, you know, we see estimates between 4 million and 6 million per breach. And so you can start with that as a baseline as the numerator in your calculation, right? But again, work closely with the relevant stakeholders in your organization, especially risk and compliance, when you're running those calculations.
Okay, thank you. One last question. I will pass this on to Todd. If or when a ransomware or VC attack occurs, what should we do and who should we contact to report it?
Yes, thank you for the question. That's very important and obviously continues to be very timely. You know, it reminds me there is really an adage in federal law enforcement circles and federal law enforcement cyber circles. There's 2 types of companies out there: those that have been attacked by network intrusions and those that don't know they've been attacked by network intrusions. So from reiterating from the prior speaker, obviously the point is you will be attacked either by a criminal scheme like BEC or phishing, or a network intrusion, or such as malware or possibly ransomware. So expect it. It's going to happen. Probably already has happened. So if it's a BEC, or phishing, BEC, report it immediately to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3.gov. It's the government repository. So not only does this allow us as investigators to track and disseminate the scams among each other, which facilitates our investigations, but due to the nature of these phishing attacks, like a BEC, hopefully these funds that you fraudulently may have paid can be stopped by the banks. And that requires immediate reporting, because if it's within 24, 48, and 72 hours, it does allow us to possibly get that money back. Again, that example from before, Barbara Cochran from Shark Tank, because she reported so quickly to the government and her bank, she was able to get her money back. So report it to IC3.gov and report it to your bank immediately. Obviously, it is embarrassing. We understand that. It happens to everyone, but by reporting it immediately, there are steps that can be taken to make yourself whole. For ransomware, obviously, although many boards do like to keep it quiet and do like to keep shareholders in the dark because it can create bad press, by letting law enforcement know, we are able to work with CISOs to share our data on similar attacks and to investigate when possible. And we also like to highlight other resources like the Department of Homeland Security's CISA's US CERT, US-CERT website, us-cert.gov, us-cert.gov. Obviously, you can go on the website and search for that, which has the latest scams, patches, and viruses. And I strongly suggest you all sign up for that, these daily, weekly, monthly announcements. And these resources and announcements will keep you informed on what's going on in the cybersecurity realm, and they're highly relevant. Obviously, you're on this phone call in this webinar for a reason, because you are the tip of the spear. And it's by taking the time to do what you're doing today and by training your employees, it's not too late. And so I can't thank you enough for this very timely question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, we don't want to get people to wait too long, but thank you to Sam and Farron and Bill and Todd, and on behalf of Stephen at Maple Business Council and my colleague Isabella from the Consulate General of Canada in Los Angeles, we want to thank everybody for participating. We have shown here all the contact details. If you want to reach out, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate, and we will be sharing the slides after to everybody, and we hope you all stay safe, healthy, and if you leave home, cover your face. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.